This is Tobe Hooper. I'm producer, director, and co-writer of this film.
And I'm David Gregory, director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Shocking Truth documentary.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular, Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother, Franklin.
So this first opening crawl is the thing that led people to believe that we were watching a true story. It doesn't actually say based on a true story, but this pretty much gives you the same impression.
Yeah, the essence of this crawl is to give you that impression.
And how much were you inspired by a true story when you were writing the script?
Well, everyone thinks that this is directly related to the Ed Gein story, but I'd heard my family members from Wisconsin talking about this murderer, this unknown monster, and that he would dig up graves and make furniture and lampshades out of human skin and that. But I didn't. I mean, I was like 3 or 4 years old, and so later that came into play when the idea came to me, this kind of gift, actually, when this story went through my head. I was working on a story about young people in isolation, in the scary woods, almost a Hansel and Gretel archetype. But I mean, that was about it. And then after the film came out, I started hearing more about Ed Gein, and then there were comic books about him, and then there were parallels in the comic books of this movie to him. So I learned about it later.
Now these corpses here were not done by Bob Burns, unlike the corpses in the house later. Was this done at a later time?
This was post-production pickup. Warren Scarron sculpted that corpse's face. It was on top of a real skeleton, because I found that we were just able to get the real skeletons much cheaper from they came from India, and for medical use and teaching.
And then the opening stuff that we just passed. Are you going to tell us at any point how you made that sound with Wayne Bell, or is that going to remain a secret?
Maybe I'll tell you, but we'll hear it a few more times.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we will. And you mentioned Warren Scarron. Warren Scarron was with the Texas Film Commission?
Yes, he started the Texas Film Commission, and was very important, in fact, in getting the finance to make this movie.
And this was one of the first productions of that Texas Film Commission. It was a fairly new thing, right?
Yeah, it was very, very new.
Some 60 miles to the south. Health officials in San Francisco reluctantly admit they may have a cholera epidemic on their hands. Some 40 cases of the highly infectious disease have been confirmed. It's believed that emergency authorities is responsible for the spread.
Ron Bozeman later became a really great first AD, and then from UPM, though, he finally became a producer, and he worked with Jonathan Demme, and was one of the producers on Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. Which I think he won an Oscar for. Did it win? It won Best Picture.
It did
right?
win Best Picture.
Yeah, when I interviewed him, he said that after doing this, as much as he enjoyed doing the movie, he was glad not to be working on such dark material in his subsequent films. And then, of course, he returned to very similar material in Silence of the Lambs and got an Oscar for it. So that's Bob Burns' Armadillo.
That is Bob Burns' Armadillo. Bob found the armadillo dead. I mean, I think it had been hit by a car, and then the armadillo shows up later in the film after he learned how to taxidermy. I mean, actually, that was a post-production shot.
Oh, was it?
I had them drive up again because yeah, I started. I mean, on paper, it looked good that the shot of the sun. I mean, coming from the credits, and that John Larroquette narrative crawl, and then sun flares in the background, then to the shot of the sun, and then that dissolved into a dead dog's eye, and the camera pulls back, and you see the van pull up, and you just can't do that. It's they're way too human, and they're way too. I mean, more human than human, and it was just too ghastly. And so then at the end of the picture, I went back in post and found that the armadillo didn't have that kind of emotional effect.
And of course, it's very Texas as well. So it's made a perfect opening shot.
Yeah, so some of those best things just happen that way.
Civil defense officials.
Okay.
This heat is just driving me crazy. I don't know if I can take much more.
The condition of retrogradation is contrary or inharmonious to the regular direction of actual movement in the zodiac.
And you mentioned the sunspots, and they're talking about Saturn and all that kind of stuff now. Like, what was the influence of that on the film at the time?
Well, it was it was about a bad day, and a little bit of solar flare is not going to hurt a bad day. I mean, it's going to have influences over. Well, now I mean, of course, they're quite bad for communications. And retrograde is a bad thing too for. I think it was Saturn in retrograde had something to do with her horoscope. So I think it was just trying to paint a universally bad, a bummer.
Yeah.
Sheriff, you go tell him your granddaddy's buried in there.
Okay.
He'll let you in.
Thank you.
Say, fella, I'm gonna run off with the girl a minute. You don't mind, do you? Honey, I'll
Here
get you
come
to the
that
sheriff.
fella right.
Hey, folks, let us through here. This girl's granddaddy's buried here.
Been in there the whole time, nothing, no sliding, sliding.
Now, was there a decision to actually make this in the height of Texas summer, or was this just when the money happened and it all came together?
It must have been just when it all came together. It could. I mean, it could have been. It would have been easier to shoot. It would have almost looked the same, except for the few really cold days. Well, actually, it got quite cold in Texas. I recall. No, it. For some reason, it just worked out. It was like all these little gifts of, if you can call something a gift.
Well, yeah, because it's like it was, from what I understand from people, it made it a torturous shoot in some occasions. But I mean, that stuff actually comes through in the movie, like very few other movies. I mean,
Yeah, I felt it was a little bit like the Native American Indian war dance, where we're all going in the same circle and dancing in the same way, and some kind of energy comes up out of the ground and from the sky, and we were all in this circle of madness, I guess.
and it comes across.
And everyone really had problems. Paul Partain was kept away from the rest of the cast while we weren't shooting, and I encouraged him, not to change clothes, not to, and he ate by himself, and no one saw Leatherface until it was time to see him. And it was kept hidden. time the shooting was over, I could see these three little rap parties sitting on the porch of the old house, and I was by myself having my own rap party.
So one rap party was the family, one rap party was the kids in the band, and the other was Paul on his own?
No, I think by that time, Paul, it was cool for Paul to, if he was there, I'm not sure if he'd been shot out and came back that last day.
Yeah, because he mentioned that he enjoyed staying in character and annoying the hell out of everybody. And I guess it wasn't until people met him later at conventions and stuff they realized what a nice fella he actually was.
Oh yeah, no, he was totally great.
Place.
Oh, no.
How did you get stuck way out here?
I was at the slaughterhouse.
I got an uncle that works at a slaughterhouse.
Hey, my brother worked there. My grandfather, too. My family's always been in meeting. Whole family attractions.
Hey man, did you go in that slaughter room or whatever they call it? The place where they shoot the cattle in the head with that big air gun thing.
Oh, that gun's no good.
I was in there once with my uncle.
No way. With a sledge. See, that was better. They died better that way.
How come? I thought the gun was better.
Oh, no. With the new way people put out of jobs.
You do that?
Look,
Where did you take these Polaroids?
Bob Burns took these Polaroids.
Would make sense.
Bob was so great. I mean, just look at the dressing in the van. I mean, it's not like you have a few things, and in fact, I made a joke with Bob at one time on the set. I went to some of the furniture and opened the drawers, and he even had the inside of the drawers dressed. I mean, in the furniture.
Well, look at that thing that the little pouch that he has.
Oh, that's a wonderful little thing. It's it was made from the those foxes that used to be quite fashionable in the 30s and 40s.
Right.
That had little alligator clamp mouths.
What are you doing?
man, put that knife up.
So was this a tube running against the
It was
knife here?
Yes, it was a tube.
And did you have a discussion before the movie was made about not actually showing too much blood in the movie, despite the fact that it was called Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Yeah, well, I wanted to at least get an R. I mean, I had to get an R. Andy Warhol, Frankenstein, and Dracula. I wanted it to play in as many drive-in theaters or wherever it could play and have as much exposure as possible. And I would call the MPAA and ask them questions, and they were helpful in so much as I asked them, how can I get a G?
No, PG, right? It wouldn't have been a G, because a G is for kids' films. For
Yeah,
general
no,
audience.
PG. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It's PG. I may have started with a G. I'm not sure, but how could I hang a girl on a meat hook in a movie, and and get that rating? And they said, well, or even PG. And they said, well, you can't. And I said, well, if you don't show entry, if it's suggested, if things are suggested, and they said, well, give it a try, and that so I use that as a template for the mechanically the way I would treat all of this violence.
Mm-hmm. Talk about shooting in this van. I mean, you were actually in there you were operating the camera in here, I think, right?
Yeah. It was myself, Daniel Pearl, and the sound man, and the van is actually moving. I mean, you can see in some shots.
Oh, so you were actually driving?
Actually driving.
Huh.
Yeah. They had a sense of driving, and they weren't cheating it.
Yeah.
And no one was rocking the van.
So I imagine that was kind of unbearable at times, no? But to have that many people inside the van.
It was so unbearable. It was so hot, and cramped, and sitting at odd angles, and have all the characters in the van at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't like shooting Ed Neal and there was no one else there. And Alan Danziger was really I mean, he was driving. We weren't being towed. He really lost it one time. I don't know, something I said, I think, most likely. I forgot what happened. He either swerved or he pulled off the side of the road, and it was pretty dramatic. It seemed that way. I mean, I'm not saying anything at all bad about Alan. He's
right, but I imagine tempers would
great.
flare under those circumstances.
I mean, that was the thing. Everyone hated me, or from my point of view, so it seemed. And that was all right. I mean, that was good. That added to the tension in the film. It helped amplify the reality that I was after.
How did you get that kind of notion to direct that way? I mean, it's almost like a method way of directing. You had the characters hang out together so that they got to know each other. You had Paul stay aside from them. You did this so it made them angry and all that kind of thing. How did that come to you?
I'd made one other film before this. I made feature-length film, Eggshells, that I learned a lot, about behavior, and then I'd made something like 60 documentaries, and before that,
And the heisters as well.
and the heisters, yeah. When I was 18 years old, 19 years old, and I finished it when I was 20. That was a short subject in Technoscope, and it was a theatrical short. So I just picked up on all of this, in particular, how actors would respond to me, being probably one of the shorter Texans. Jim Cito is a Shakespearean actor. It was with the Alley Theater in Houston, and was a great King Lear.
Really?
And the first time I met him, I was acting in a film that he was in.
Was that the Wind Splitters?
Yeah, and he looked like a kind of strange version of very strange version of Bogart in a way in that film.
Yeah.
And I knew he had this range that he could just kind of show this kind of eccentric lunacy without it showing. I mean, that getting the portrayal and the behavior of lunacy without it looking like they're acting the part, but truly their emotions are pushing, the character emotion of a kind of an insane backstory in their lives coming to surface.
Yeah.
And pushing through. That was always for me watching films with, and still is, films that were made this year even. The portrayal of portraying insanity is so terrible.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, you can either be nuts or be acting nuts, and the difference is hateful.
Well, particularly in horror movies back then. I mean, if there was somebody who was insane, I mean, they were very theatrical about it.
Yeah, very. Yeah.
And so, what did you know about insanity such that you could actually direct a performance like Jim's, which is obviously outstanding?
I had a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins, and I was around a lot of unstable. Unstable isn't the right word, but I don't know how to say this without being so non-PC, and I don't want to offend anyone. They're mostly all gone now. But I grew up in hotels too, and I saw a lot of madness in hotels, a lot of violence, a lot of alcoholic behavior. I saw with 7, 8 years old, and would see things, like people pulling pistols on one another and threatening one another, and fights, and so I don't know. I mean, I saw a lot of this kind of thing that was around hotel living, and it was kind of carnival-like, circus carnival-like.
Which is a family dynamic you revisited in the Funhouse as well,
Yeah.
where it's like it functions on its own level,
Yeah.
but it involves a kind of a lot of yelling back and forth and strange dynamics. Like
Yeah.
I mentioned.
Yeah, and forgive any of my being guarded as I was trying to tell that story.
Okay.
But you can assume whatever.
Indeed. Well, I mean, as you've mentioned before, it's something that I think a lot of people can relate to is that there's a lot of craziness around families and family gatherings. When people have family gatherings on holidays and things like that, it starts out with this perfect ideal, but descends into some sort of madness, or an argument will happen, or something like that.
Yes. That relatives calling one relative calling another relative's car a son of a bitch, and they don't speak for 5 years.
Don't say it. Just smear that guy, man.
I always wondered this blood smear that Ed Neal puts, the hitchhiker puts on the side of the van. Is that actually supposed to be some sort of specific pattern, or is it just him smearing blood to mess up the van?
You know, he is deliberately trying to put something to mark the van for quite possibly Jim Cito to recognize. You know, because they may just pull in there for gas, or but Cito doesn't actually see it. I mean, what he's doing, he's like a dog leaving his scent or his mark. And it's a personal thing, but that the character, it's the character's behavior to leave his mark.
This house that they're in here, was this in this condition, or did Bob Burns decorate it to be in this condition?
This house was in this condition. I mean, there may have been a few things moved around. Oh, this house was a perfect find. This house is actually directly across the street from the Hero house.
So on Quick Hill?
Yeah. So whereas they exit this house to go down into a little ditch and into and they approach the back of the house. I had to hide this house because it was directly across the street. So it was. But by the way, I shot it. They come up on the back of the house.
So were both of these houses abandoned? No, actually, the Hero house was lived in.
It was lived in. It was being lived in. There's a room that you don't see that's off to the side that the guy living in the house was living in, and rented the rest of the house to us.
This new audio commentary, I think, it's almost 20 years since you recorded the last audio commentary with Gunnar and Daniel Pearl.
Yeah, and I wanted to say something about the sound mix, and a man that really helped me a lot in my career since the Heisters that I made when I was 19, and Buzz Knudsen, who was the head mixer at Tadeo, that mixed the Heisters, and 6 or 7 time Academy Award winner, and he mixed Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and he mixed my very first film, and gave me an office at Tadeo on Seward Street on A stage, and it was an editing room, and I was cutting sound effects on the Heisters, and was looking down on the mixing of The Sound of Music that I think he won the Academy Award for that, or My Fair Lady, or both. He did both. But then he mixed this twice, and one before the mistake that was made on the A-B roll, where I had to go back. It's a way of making invisible splices, and the film students doing it back in Austin. Whatever the thing is, always scrape picture, never black. So anyway, the splices showed in short. So I had to go back in and remove a frame as I could from almost every shot in the film, and that meant recutting all of the sound effects, recutting all of the music, recutting all of the dialogue, and then so Buzz mixed it again, but that time when he mixed it, I was able to sweeten it with little goodies that he had, like the bed spring foley from The Exorcist that he mixed.
Mm-hmm.
So like the bird cage with the chicken in it, has this little squeaky sound that is, is actually Reagan in the bed jumping around, out of that Foley work. But he's was an amazing man, an incredible mixer. This was before you could punch in, like you couldn't start or stop. You had to mix an entire reel, a 10-minute reel at one time.
Yeah.
And if there was a mistake, you'd go back and you'd mix it again. And anyway, I just wanted to mention, one of my favorite people is Buzz Knudsen.
Gasoline. I can leave him my guitar, give him a couple bucks. We gotta come back by here anyway. I can pick up my guitar.
Okay, so they mentioned the gasoline here. There was something about a gas crisis that was involved.
Oh, right, yeah,
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. There was gas rationing, and there were queues like sometimes 2 miles long to get into the filling station, to buy whatever amount of gas you were allowed to buy, and it was some kind of gasoline shortage. I mean, some political thing going on somewhere in the world. Yeah, I mean this bubbled up out of its time, one way or another. It all had it had to do with people being put out of jobs, as the hitchhiker said. It was a time where they said, how was it put by the businessmen? Money is tight.
Mm-hmm.
And the Wisconsin is absolutely accidental. A happy accident, I should say.
Because that's where Ed Gein's from?
Right.
Right.
And I'd been asked that question.
Because as far as I'm aware, there's a lot of people who, over the years, saw this and thought that this was something that actually happened in Texas. I mean, did you get asked that a lot about the case that you based it on?
I've argued with people denying that it was a true story.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying it now, and I've said it for a long time. I've said this, and it's okay. It will never go away that this is true.
That's kind of fun, a fun part of it.
It is. Perhaps it was a small piece of a jigsaw puzzle that in some way is infused with reality, because there were things happening around us, and there had been a taxidermy murder.
Oh yeah.
And I think I've been told it happened before the film was shot, and I don't believe that. I think it happened after the film by like 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But things I had you could feel that things were on edge and had the potential for popping.
Okay, we're about to see obviously one of the iconic scenes, the entrance of Leatherface. Tell me about how you came up with making this such a startling entrance.
Well, for one thing, okay, now it gets switched over to a hammer that has a foam rubber head. It still knocked Bill Vale down. I mean, the shot of Leatherface lifting this 25-pound hammer was, and there's a little cattle ramp built there, and but shooting the scene, rehearsing it, and getting ready to shoot it, and I needed something else. I mean, I needed something to button the scene up with, so I had everyone take a couple of hours break while Bob Burns built the door. And so the door was spontaneously, it was needed, and it was, it was done on the spot.
Oh, so that's kind of exclamation point at the end of the scene. That
Yeah,
was something you
yeah.
came up with right there on the set.
Yeah, it needed that exhibition of power.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, it was done on the spot. Bob said, "Oh, I don't know how long it'll take." So, well, as fast as you can, I said, "Okay."
And how did Bill Vale react? That was the first time he saw Leatherface, right?
Oh, it blew his mind. He saw the man's size, and then and then he hit him with, I switched to, I had the single of Leatherface lifting the hammer, and then a shot of Bill, which is I'm sure the first shot I shot because it was his true reaction to seeing it, and then switched over to the hammer, and when he hit him, it knocked him down and put a big blister on his eye.
All right, talk a bit about these sculptures
it's
here.
Just it's Bob Burns building his things. He would go out and collect bones, anything dead that he could, from a turtle shell he finds it. It strangely has a hammer mark in it. It looks like someone.
I mean, that's a lot of bones.
That's a lot of bones and a lot of teeth, and the teeth are all real. I mean, they came from a dentist friend of Bob's, and I think Bob put fillings, as I recall, soldering material to create fillings.
Like to make sure that we knew they were human.
Yeah, and I wanted it as cluttered as possible. I did get Bob to these things hanging from strings. These bones. I wanted the stuff in space even, and the chicken really came from needing feathers floating in the air. I needed as much ooky business in the air as possible. Okay, that whole shot, her back has been exposed. The costume was chosen to show the exposed back to make this gag even worse. Now you can see that there's dried blood on the walls.
Yeah.
That makes you think of blood, and then you can see this shot coming up that there is no blood in, but the wash tub, it's there to collect blood.
Yeah.
And but not to collect it to do necessarily anything with it. I'm sure they did, but it was to collect it to try to keep the place a little bit clean.
And so, how did you manage the effects? Thing you'd given her the skimpiest costume imaginable.
Yeah. Well, she had a parachute harness went between her legs and then ran up her back, and so the way it was cut, I cut back around to the reverse, and she'd been and the hook, the point of the hook had been turned around and still hanging on that jib, and this iron or steel ring had been threaded, on the hook already, and then raised up, and so she was raised, and then Leatherface, jammed her down, and I'm sure it was a very uncomfortable experience for Terry.
And the actual mechanism from which she is hung was something that was completely built from scratch by Bob.
Yeah, out of railroad ties. The same kind of material that the swing out front is built of.
Oh, so that the swing was completely built from scratch as well.
Oh yeah, it was built from scratch.
Oh right, because that was going to be a big swing, because it's the sort of thing that a big kid would have played in as a kid.
Yeah, and also the bigger and the more screwy looking, it was better. I mean, it wasn't a delicate thing.
Because we only get to imagine what the childhood of somebody like Leatherface was like.
Yeah.
I mean, I know in the remake they go into some sort of detail, which I thought was upsetting. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some things. I mean, most things that you see Leatherface and his behavior, and you're processing that information. You're going to come up with something much better than say someone that's nose has been he's had problem with his nose.
Yeah, he was ugly in school. Yeah.
And his past was well, he was just kind of like a messed up baby Huey in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And had been around dead things and death, and and that was his playground. That was his sandbox.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we only get one slight suggestion, well, overt suggestion, that there was even one female in the house as well.
Right.
In Grandma. Again, was that something that you decided early on that it was just going to be a masculine household, and that was it?
Well, Grandma's plenty dead. I mean, she, but yes, I mean, Grandma died a long time ago, and they of course kept her,
Mm-hmm.
and then kept her with old Grandpa. I mean, he needed company. God knows how old he is. He's intended to look like a corpse when you first encounter him. And I think up to the point where he starts nursing
On the finger, yeah.
On the finger.
Excuse me, I'm looking for some friends. Hello? Is anybody here? Kirk?
Now, is there any difference between the way Alan reacted when he first saw Leatherface and...
Oh, Alan truly freaked out. The little scream that Alan lets off just before the hammer comes down on his head was absolutely real. I mean, it was.
It's quite a high-pitched scream.
Yeah, it is.
How much time did you have in this house to make it look like this?
I had all the wallpaper covered with butcher paper, and smeared down with blood. And this kind of freezer, it always scared the hell out of me when I was a child because it looked like a sarcophagus.
Yeah.
But I think it was about 3 weeks to mess this house up.
Oh, and didn't you do something to make it actually freezing cold inside the freezer?
Put dry ice in there, and she would stay in there, quite a long time until we, fiddled around and were ready to shoot.
Yeah.
Knock on
And the guy who actually owned this house was in the other room, perfectly okay with you doing this in his house.
I only saw him a couple of times. He was, he was a hippie with a long beard, and he had his little world back there that may have been quite interesting. I mean, maybe not of the same kind of, not echoing this, but I mean,
Oh, is that where the marijuana plants were?
yeah, there's a part of like an acre starting at the corner of the back of the house that had plants that were like 12 feet high, and he was growing them, and I mean, what can you do?
Statute of limitations, I think, has passed at this point.
Oh, statutes of, like, who cares? I mean,
but from what Ron Bozeman said, it was actually quite a serious crime back then in Texas to have marijuana. You would actually go to jail for a significant amount of time.
Oh, yeah. I think, maybe not life, but I think in Louisiana, in some southern states, I think it was the death penalty.
Jesus.
I mean, I think now, I don't know, or I heard that. But yeah. And it was a significant amount of plants.
I wanted to.
One of the investors saw it, and it was way too late to pull the plug on the movie, and he said and he was in politics and local or state, and he said his life flashed before his eyes when he went. So
it's like, why did I get involved in this horror movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a more kind of general question about horror movies at this time. There were very few that were contemporary, and very few that were set in, in the area of an American city. Horror movies up until that point were often Eastern European or whatever. There were some exceptions like Night of the Living Dead and Last House on the Left. But what made you decide that if you were going to do a horror movie, I'm going to do it contemporary, I'm going to do it about a cannibal family, all stuff that was not really prominent in the genre at the time?
Yeah, well, really couldn't do, I grew up on Hammer films and I loved them. It was the time for a contemporary horror film for identification. I'd stopped, as being someone that would see a movie, go to the movies every day, if not twice a day, and those films, it just kind of played out, and Godzilla and Mothra and so some bad vampire films, and Frankenstein 2000, and things like that. But it was, it was easy for me to recognize, the monster as in man, and the grave is, that's why it starts in the graveyard, is to give you this this atmosphere of death, and and you know, symbolically, I mean, with the symbolism of death. So you're carrying this dread. You know, even if it doesn't bother you as much as it bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's something that you're carrying there, and yeah, I wanted you to identify. You know, it was you know, atrocities that been going down in the world, and you weren't necessarily safe. And definitely, you know, in this kind of Grimm's fairy tale, you know, I do think that comes across to a degree, that you're this Hansel and Gretel kind of
The house in the woods.
the house in the woods.
Yeah.
I have to say, you know, even the house, the location was unique in itself beyond, say, I mean, you know, I mean, it was almost American Gothic. I mean, not the painting, but and the background, you know, the farmer and his wife, but it did have a Gothic, a very unique look, that something was like, something could happen, or appropriate in the way that the Bates house was actually appropriate in the design of later the built house that for Salem's Lot. You know, there's something about the house
Mm-hmm.
that you know, that I could get into Carl Jung and such as that, talking about houses, but this thing just kind of appeared, you know, in location scouting.
So you saw it as something creepy could be happening in that house. So in a way, it looked like a haunted house, just not a traditional haunted house. Like
Yeah,
this.
I mean, it was different from nice little places in the country.
Yeah, I mean, how much had you been out into the country outside of the city in Texas at the time to know what happens in rural Texas? Because when I was making the documentary with you, you know, once we would drive outside of Austin, Texas gets very different.
It does, yeah. Once you're out of that hill country, I would venture that way a little bit, but really not that much, because I was afraid of it out there. I mean, not afraid in this way, but I mean, I was afraid. I felt uncomfortable getting away from the city. I'm just talking about. I'm not talking about fear for my life. I'm talking about comfortable, and that there was television.
Mm-hmm.
There were movies. You know, there was civilization. There was hope for the future.
Okay, so that sound appeared again there.
There we go. Okay, all right. It's a sound that I've tried to recreate, and it's almost impossible to recreate it, recording digitally. So it needs to. You need to have analog tape. It's a tuning fork, a rather large tuning fork. Being, striking it, on my knee, and then, holding it by the base, and then lowering it onto a string on a broken instrument with a contact mic, and then going through a series of Sony stereo tape recorders, where the tape would go through, like I think three tape recorders lined up together, and to create a kind of reverberation. The tape would go through one recording head to another, and then back again. And by adjusting the volumes, and then sped up and slowed down, and trying it on various instruments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean the sound design or the soundtrack that you and Wayne Bell came up with was also pretty avant-garde in terms of, you're not using traditional instruments. Tell me a bit about how that process happened.
Yeah, well, I'd been recording what I called music for several years. I mean, I guess you could call it a hobby. I mean, but it was, music, if you will, and it sounded like music to me. And it was, a lot of distortion, a lot of instruments being distorted by tape speed, or one thing or the other, until and by myself I could create this big orchestral sounding sound that you didn't really know what the instruments, I mean, it was using broken instruments like broken kotos, African instruments, and so in some cases just sheets of tin that came from making lithographs of things, the piece of tin, shaking them, and bowls, metal bowls with various amounts of water, and a lot of the choral sound was a contact mic at the end of a cardboard tube about 3 feet long that I would howl down into the tube, and then distort the hell out of it,
Mm-hmm.
and change the speed of it. And I mean, things like that, like bass fiddles with tin cans, and and finger cymbals and all. So when you draw as hard as you can, with this little, almost let the bow get completely rosin free, and drag it, across the thing so hard that and the contact mic and the body of the thing, so it would create this rumble and jingling.
Now this scene was, from what I understand, was a pretty trying scene for Marilyn. Do you remember that?
Oh yes, sir. Oh, I do. I shot this scene either 11 times or 17 times, her coming through the door, breaking through the door, and she really messed her knees up badly. But I shot it until I got it, and because I needed it in one take, the beginning of it, to get the information out of her, so that he could go, Cedow could go to take a look outside the door, and but it was opening that door and leaving the doorway open,
Right.
that that created a lot of tension, and you were about to learn something in the film too, when you see that she escaped and she went directly back into the nucleus of the hell.
Yeah.
But Marilyn was so truly worked herself into, she was hysterical.
Yeah.
And beyond being able to get the lines out properly, and that it was, and you can't ask for better than that. I mean, and that creating that kind of behavior, or working with an actor to get there.
Yeah, and her and Jim both told me that it got to a point where he was actually not hitting her hard enough with the brush, such that it didn't look like he was hitting her, and eventually she was the one who said, just hit me with it, so that it looks real, so we can get it done.
When we get down to the finger cutting, remind me too.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that I learned about only a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And screening the film in Santa Monica, and I'd heard this rumor that was in.
We'll get to it. Yeah. And now Jim, you had for less. Jim was kind of the veteran of everybody on the movie. He was the older member of the cast, and did he enter into the spirit of it just like everybody else?
Yeah. Oh yes, he did. Jim was incredible, and I mean his direction was that he was not quite sure morally where he stood at any one moment, because if he tastes blood, then he's going to go in the direction of the beast, and but he would try to pull himself out of it, or he will see something that starts to pull him out of that. Like in this scene, he's two personalities. He's poking the hell out of her, with a stick, and at one moment enjoying it, and then pulling himself back into a kind of functional reality, and saying, now, this is not so bad, and until his conflict, toward the end of the film, he's even telling her how simple and easy and potentially how good it will be for Grandpa to kill her.
Right. And of course, he takes the father role against the kids here, so he's trying to act mature.
Now, the idea for having a character like that, however, this is an exaggerated character, but when I was still a teenager, I think, or early 20s maybe, I saw Seconds, Frankenheimer movie, and there's the scene where Rock Hudson, the reborn, is not going to make it, and they put him back in the hospital, and he thinks he's going to start again and have plastic surgery again, and he's in the hospital bed at night, and Will Geer comes in, and Will Gear knows that he will be sending the Rock Hudson character to the cadaver file in the morning, or they're getting ready to take him to the cadaver file. And he's talking to him like, Will Gear's talking to him like a football coach, you know, or a baseball coach about, you know, how you didn't make the team with that kind of behavior, that kind of attitude that was that had a distance from talking about the real serious business of life and death. And so that character and also things from A Clockwork Orange really helped me in trying to, you know, push, exaggerate without going, you know, into some kind of, well, to keep it in this ironic reality, and the comedy. I mean,
yeah, you damn fool, you ruined the door. There are many great, hilarious lines.
But they're inside a reality of these characters, so you know it isn't like comedy for comedy. It's ironic. I mean, it's funny because it's funny, but they mean it, and you know he's.
But you always saw a humor in this movie that wasn't necessarily seen.
Yeah, and it wasn't seen for like at least 8 years. And I think, you know, the shocking aspect of the film was so shocking that at first the audience processed that. I mean, it was like you know, quite a lot to process. But I've seen this now, and it's being understood, you know, in that way. I mean, in the way I was speaking about it being I mean, you know, you can't really call it a black comedy because the comedy isn't there to be played out. It's comedy. It's there to you know, it's kind of like the family members, you know, calling one of them calling the new car of the other one's a son of a bitch, and they don't speak forever.
One other question that's always been a mystery, and you may still want to keep it a mystery, is Wayne Bell said that when you were doing the noises at the beginning for the pre-graveyard scenes, you said, "Wayne, stay outside. I'm going inside with the microphone. Leave it with me." Do you remember what you were doing in that room?
Yeah, I was making grunting sounds for Leatherface, squeaks, and squawks, and I had to be by myself to get to put myself in the frame of mind or whatever to do that. It's in the very opening scene.
Yeah.
When in the dark, the graves are being opened, and I was making squeaks and squawks and there, as well as when Jerry first arrives. Some of those first Leatherface sounds were me, and then Wayne's father made the pig squealing sound. Anyway, when I would let Wayne back into the room, we had a lot of chicken bones. We started laying meat cleavers to and breaking and such as that. Yeah, that's interesting. Wayne didn't.
Yeah, he didn't
Wayne
know.
didn't know that. Now he does.
Okay, so we're coming up to the finger cutting now.
Yes. Now, I was at a screening, and someone told me that the blood tube wasn't working. I mean, it was that Gunner was not able to. I was behind the camera because I was good at hand holding and had and knew the macro lens quite well. But anyway, someone told me that Gunner kept trying to cut her finger, and it just wouldn't work. So she told him to go ahead and cut her finger. And I said, I don't believe that. I mean, whoever in the audience told me that. And then later at another screening, I mentioned it, and I said, but I don't believe that's true. And someone, a hand came up, and someone said that it is true that Marilyn said that. And when I look at it now, and he draws the knife across the finger, it does look as though it isn't leaving a streak of blood, but that the blood kind of builds up out of her finger. Now, I guess the test would be to ask old grandpa, did
John.
he taste blood? I mean, had you heard that story?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, I believe it. It seems like at this point in the shooting as well, things were just getting to that point where you just need to get as much done quickly.
Part of this is, it's already 110 degrees it's daytime, and there's a black tent hanging over the house. The ASA rating on this Ektachrome commercial, I think, was about 40. That meant you had to have a hell of a lot of light. And that stuff, these props were smoking, the lights in it, and the skeletons, and the smell of the...
Yeah.
So a doctor came out, with Dramamine and all, because I'd say cut, and people would run to the window and throw up.
Yeah, this was the hellish day.
It was. This was the 27-hour day.
Now, was it Dr. Barnes who came to the set and issued everybody with the Dramamine?
I don't know. That would make sense, though, because the doctor that did the prosthetic
on John Dugan.
On John Dugan, yeah. That would make sense.
And he apparently just wanted to try his hand at special makeup effects, so he created the grandpa makeup.
Some kind of parchment paper. That was the beauty of it. It wasn't like a latex material. That he may have used latex with parchment, but he would use coat hangers, to make the formation of it. Because I used to have this expression about taking a piece of coat hanger and shaping it into a smile and wearing it, and it must have come from this, but he wanted to make it the way they could make it.
Yeah. The Leatherface wasn't an artist. He would use the tools that he had at his disposal.
Now this particular mask, no one could get the makeup right, and I said, give me the mask, give me the makeup case, and I kept having this image of Baby Jane, and so I just smeared the eye shadowing on and made it rather extreme.
Now, what's this thing here that we've got with the chicken head on the forelegs?
That chicken. Well, Bob Burns made it, but he did not make it out of the chicken that was in the bird cage. That chicken was treated extremely well. However, if you pick that thing, when you pick it up, you could pick it up, and it's on the legs of that thing are chicken feet, and if you pick it up, the claws would still curl underneath it because it had not yet dried. This stuff in the heat, and 500 or 600 pounds of the pound had delivered
the dogs and cats.
The dogs, and they were on fire. Someone put 5 gallons of gasoline on them, and thinking that they would disappear, and the smoke was coming into the house. Yeah, I mean, you can see the chicken feet there, and they would just curl up under.
And the armadillo from the opening shot. So all right, so you'd have the smoke from the burning dogs coming into the house as well, in addition to everything else.
Yes.
Now, how was everybody when this day ended? What did everybody do?
Let me see if I can think of the ending.
Like when you finally called rap on this.
I think some of them went to sleep on the floor. Some of them were sleeping. We were trading out, letting some of the crew sleep, and it was such a day. I don't even know what I did. I don't know.
That's understandable. It just seems to me that everybody probably just collapsed,
just burnt out.
Yeah.
John, Grandpa had been in the prosthetic for the 27 hours, and Jim was a SAG actor, and this was his last day, and I couldn't afford another day, so that was primarily why this was shot, and we were running out of schedule.
I would imagine if there was a SAG rep on the set, they might not have allowed it to go that long.
No, they wouldn't. This being another day, this was actually a sunny day, and so I would have to wait on each shot. I mean, the last shot is shot at sunset, but this pre-sunset, I would have to wait for a cloud to come cover the sun, and it would be sometimes waiting for a small cloud to come 200 miles, and just miss the sun. So we would stand out there. But it took a long time. I mean, I'm not sure how long. I can't remember. Now that's shot from inside the cab, approaching Leatherface and
Hitchhiker.
Yes, the hitchhiker was a reverse shot. It was backing away from them, but the Eclair NPR did not run in reverse, so Daniel was in the back of the truck, and so we turned the camera upside down, And when you turn it upside down and then you flip the film back right side up, it's running in reverse.
And this.
Yeah, and there's a metal plate under there, but it went through the steak and in the bag the blood was in, and really burned him. I mean, really, the scream was real. I mean, it was real pain.
So the chain going against the metal plate basically made it hot.
Yeah, it made it very, very, yeah, I think that was like a one take kind of thing.
But you didn't get this. Marilyn said you didn't get this take when you first filmed it, and she thought she was done and took those clothes off for one last time, and then she was called and said we didn't get the shot, so we had to do it again. Do you remember that?
I don't, but
No. So basically, she had to get the nasty pants back on again and cover herself in blood.
Doesn't surprise me. And he just doesn't know what to do.
So here we are, 40 years later.
Yeah, 40 years later.
How do you feel about talking about it all these years later?
Oh, I feel great about it. I almost remember being there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to talk about it. As our conversation progressed during this, I was kind of actually traveling back a little bit, and breaking through those membranes of time.
I mean, it did. The shoot actually went on a bit longer than expected, and the post-production went on a lot more than expected.
Yes.
Did you think at the time it was like, geez, I just want to get this damn thing done and move on to the next one?
Yeah, well, yeah, and things. I had to mix the sound twice because of a mistake in the A/B rolling, and but I was told it's this old Hollywood legend by the people here, like Buznitz and Tadeo, and that a film that has that there'd been this myth in Hollywood, a film that is that impossible to finish is going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to last.
And here we are.
Here we are, David.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.